Thank you all for joining. You guys obviously know the topic of the discussion today. I just want to start with a short intro about myself before we dive right in. So I'm Shay. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Unframe. Before that, and we'll talk about Unframe in a bit, and we'll talk about enterprise AI. Before that, I was the co-founder and CTO of a company called Noname Security. For about 4 years, grew it all the way from 0 to 250 folks, and sold it to Akamai for $500 million. Been doing software engineering, cybersecurity, and AI for over a decade now. Very happy to be here today to talk about AI. I think it's a pretty exciting and interesting topic, and I'll dive right in. All right. So in Unframe, we're saying welcome to the AI era. And I think that this concept is something, just with a bit of color in the beginning, I think this is a concept that I think most people really, I was about to say most organizations, but I feel almost like most people, it's all about adopt AI or fall behind. Um, I think that that's a pretty well understood point. But in this slide, I want to spend a bit of time on is while most organizations understood that adopting AI is a must, generic solutions just don't solve your challenges. And what do I mean by that? Well, generic solutions either don't fit your most impactful use cases, or they don't work that well because they suffer from inaccuracies and incompleteness, the 50% accurate, and then who wants to use it? And definitely it doesn't scale. Most organizations and most enterprises we talk with have mapped hundreds of different AI use cases, but no one wants to source hundreds of different AI point solutions and then maintaining those and governing those. Now, some organizations are trying to build themselves, kind of try to build the solutions themselves. There's a few problems with that approach. From a high level, AI talent is very expensive and it takes a long time to build something yourself. But I want to spend a bit more time on this problem slide and tell you about the things that I've noticed that don't work so well, or we at Unframe noticed that don't work so well. One is I'll call them the indie agents. So the thinking was, let's enable anyone in the org to write their own agent. And there's a million platforms that can probably give you that kind of sense. And then a lot of value will be created through that. If we just give them either an internal platform or just our own team, will create a bunch of agents, and that will deliver AI value. And what we found is that it's the same generic approach. You're kind of trying to think, okay, I'll create an AI agent that just integrates to the whole of IT environment, and the IT team will just magically use it. And then what you find out is, because you didn't start from a use case, because you didn't start with user story in mind, you created something generic that no one is actually using. And you see enterprises with hundreds of different of agents, and really rarely any of them make an impact. The other side of it, which is also common, and I'm sorry I'm spending some time on the problem because I think it is important to understand kind of the hype and what doesn't really work. The other side of it is the mega agent. So some organizations say, why don't we just create one AI agent that anyone can go into and help them do their job? Someone from marketing can use that mega agent for their marketing collateral. Someone from finance can use the mega agent to analyze financial statements, etc., etc. And what they don't feel, and it isn't obvious initially, is that they're almost working on solving the AGI problem. Because if you're trying to build a mega agent that is all capable, you're kind of competing with the foundational models almost, and so it's a lost cause from the get-go. Um, yeah, there's some other problematic stuff that I noticed. Obviously, the generic solutions themselves, that's also a issue that I noticed. So not just indie agents, but thinking, okay, let's take an area, let's take marketing and create an agent for marketing. So not like each person can create their own agent, but let's take the dev team and tell them, create an agent for marketing, create an agent for sales. Great. Again, if it didn't come from an actual use case with actual business users standing behind it, probably not going to make an impact. So enough about the problem. We thought about those problems in Unframe, and we saw it through discussions with enterprises, and we thought about a different approach. And what we said is, let's create a platform, and we called it the Turnkey Enterprise AI Platform that enabled you to bring to life any AI use case that you have in a matter of hours instead of months. But rather than taking that platform, throwing it at you and saying, okay, now you can build your use cases faster, part of our offering is actually to create those use cases for you on top of our platform at no additional cost. We call it, say, a use case, get the solution. We sit for 15, 20 minutes, talk about an actual use case, what it is you hope to achieve, where's the problematic area, what is the job to be done, and what do you expect the AI or the solution to do? What are the relevant data sources? How do you envision it? And then 2 to 3 days later, you already have it live. You have it in your hands. You can try it. You can try it on dummy data. You can integrate it to your actual same integration, same relevant data sources. And only if it gives you the business outcome, only then we move to licensing. So the whole process is somewhat risk-free. Now, how are we able to do it? How can we turn it around in 2, 3 days and actually make an impact? So much so that we bet on it. Well, what we realized in Unframe pretty early on is that although AI use cases can be varied, the building blocks from which you will compose these are going to be similar. They're not simple. It's not simple to build any of those building blocks. And every single one of them, I can go pretty deep as to the challenges it has. By now, I think Unframe's platform has over hundreds, I think over 200 different building blocks that are being reused. But those building blocks have to be generic and have to be able to be tailored to the individual use case. Otherwise, it won't work well. And the way we do it in Unframe is with our blueprint approach. On top of our platform that has those building blocks, we use something called a blueprint. You can think of it like a spec file that then configures those different building blocks for the individual use case, for the individual solution that we are going after. And you get the full-blown thing, the front end, the back end, the database, the integrations. It kind of makes the whole thing up. So you just come in a turnkey way, can immediately use it and can see actual business outcome, which is what we're after. Because without the business outcome, it's just another generic chatbot, and no one needs more of these. In a bit higher level, every single one of the Unframe solutions comes with a full suite of AI capabilities. So in a high level, in natural language, you can analyze endless amount of data, insert and edit, search across structured and unstructured data, have AI conclude insights for you, take actions on your behalf, and communicate via Slack, email, Teams, etc. We can integrate with almost anything under the sun, any SaaS vendor you might be using. So think Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday, Jira, etc. Any database or data lake or data warehouse you might have, old, new, doesn't matter. Any file repository, so think PDF, contracts, financial statements, Excel sheets that are on your SharePoint, Google Drive, no problem including those. We never require you to share data outside your perimeter. We obviously understand the risk of sharing data outside. Every single one of the solutions can be deployed on your perimeter, in your private cloud, on your data center. Doesn't matter, and it's pretty simple to get those up. I'll say that we came with this message to the market and found ourselves working across all industries and all verticals you can imagine. Banking, insurance, retail, pharma, healthcare, manufacturing, real estate, construction, and so on and so on and so on. We felt most of the use cases fall into one of these 4 categories. There can be more, but those are the general repeating patterns, I will say. We have a demo, so it's not just purely slides. I actually want to show you actual impact being made with AI or an actual solutions. What is the difference between an actual solution and, if you will, the generic chatbot? So I'm going to switch over to a platform page. So you can think of this is obviously not a real company. It's Acme Inc. And it has a lot of solutions in its environment. I already opened them up here so we can quickly navigate between them. So I'm going to go into this one. I actually like to start with this one because it's rather visual. So it's simple to see and experience and understand. So this solution was done with one of the three largest real estate companies in the world. And it's all about commercial properties. So think about a real estate company that manages over 50,000 properties around the globe. And you can think of a commercial property, that in this anonymized environment, there's not that many. I think there's about 6. But the source of truth to these commercial properties are lease agreements. And just so we understand what a lease agreement is and how it looks like, I'm going to open one and I'm going to scroll down here. So you can see this is a commercial lease agreement. It's 80 pages long and it describes everything you can imagine, from the base rent to who's responsible for cleanups and electricity and etc. Sometimes these are like triple scanned with scribbles on the side. They're definitely not digital. And this is the source of truth that most estate companies are used to have. Now, obviously, AI came into the world, and the idea came that they could use AI to extract and abstract that data. So instead of working with the underlying source, which is a PDF that's not very useful, you can extract the different data points from that original lease agreement. And that can be dates, that can be, area information, who's responsible for whatever you can think of. And it's not just numeric things. It's also like the actual clauses separated according to, casualty, electric, gas, etc. But it was very important that any data point that you extract, if you click on it, it will immediately take you to where it came from and also give you a confidence score. So if the AI is not very confident in what was extracted, you want to engage an analyst that can then come in, validate, and if the information is wrong, they can easily double click and edit it. I believe in that environment, the confidence was set to 80. So anything below 80, the analyst would get engaged. Now, once you did that, it becomes quite impactful, because now you have a digital portfolio that you can put on a map and obviously look at it on a list. But most importantly, now you can have AI capabilities on top of that. So any question that I have on my portfolio, I can click and ask, or pick a question from my AI catalog that already has some pre-saved questions. For example, how much rentable area do we have per state? And something that God knows how you would have done it in the past. Like, you would have to open these agreements and go navigate through. And if you had a question about a single clause in a single contract, you would have to open it. But now, once you digitize those and abstracted those, now it's so much more usable. You can obviously start to create dashboards. You can see the underlying data. You can share it with your colleagues and have them ask follow-up questions. And that completely transformed the way they work. They started adding workflows. So every time lease is coming up on expiry, automatically notify the broker, notify whenever a new lease is being added in a certain city, and notify the manager, etc., etc. So if you look at this use case, it generally falls into the category of extraction and abstraction. Now, as you look at this use case, start to imagine how far this is from a generic chatbot. Right? If you gave someone that and said, hey, do this with the generic chatbot, no broker in the world would want to use it. It's just not what they're going after. It has to be tailored for the business user. I'm going to switch one tab over and show you a solution from a different category that I also think is pretty interesting. So this is a solution from the IT ops world, integrating into your Confluence, Jira, New Relic, ServiceNow, Sumo Logic, Splunk, Datadog, etc. And the use case that stood behind this was, as I'm working on my IT ops issue, if I have a live production issue, or if I'm looking at a Jira ticket that was created due to an issue or a customer request, I have so many different systems that I have to go to understand the backstory of it, or what's the playbook to solving it, that it's actually painful. And so the use case was, first and foremost, as I'm looking at an item, so let's say I'm looking at a Jira issue, I want to see all the related ServiceNow incident it has and all the logs that are relevant to that particular issue. I don't want to do it manually. I believe AI is smart enough to do it for my organization, but this is how I want us to start to operate. And obviously, this is what we did. Now, what's really cool about this is that any new integration that you would add, you would have automatic correlations to all the other integrations that you have. So if you were to add GitLab now or GitHub now, it will automatically tell you what was merged, what wasn't merged. If you're working on a production issue, you can start asking, what's the playbook? It will give you the Confluence document. Is there a Jira ticket already open? It will bring it up, or it will tell you there's nothing open yet. If there was one, you can ask, was it merged? It can tell you, was it merged? Was it not? And just like before, you don't have to use it just for a single item. If you have questions of trends or anything like that, I can pick one question, show me the trend of service requests open and closed for each month, and I immediately get the answer. And I can ask follow-up questions. For example, can you show the requests of July 2024 in the list? And so again, it all started from a use case, not I need an IT ops bot. And now I can continue. I can say, okay, only show me the open ones. And you can start creating workflows. So those that have been pending for over 3 months, please send an email to the owner. And we'll actually do that. But again, it has to start with the use case in mind. And then I think the cool thing about Unframe is that you have the use case in mind. Getting it out doesn't take 8 months, like it would take probably to an average team in an org. It actually takes 2 to 3 days. So much so that we say, hey, take it, try it, and only if you like it, we'll move on to licensing. By the way, we charge per solution per year, so it's pretty easy to anticipate. It doesn't go by volume. It doesn't go by amount of questions, nothing like that. Per solution per year. So we saw an example from the observability world, which was the IT ops. I want to show you one more from the observability world, and this is in the sales world, integrating into the sales stack of the org. So think Salesforce, Clary, Gong, Chorus, sales enablement system, marketing collateral, things of that nature. Now, obviously, you can understand how this dashboard was created with natural language questions. I can click and ask any question that come to mind. But what stood behind that use case was that it's great that you have these sales capabilities, but no one in the sales org would actually use them if this lives on a different platform, or even if it lives on Salesforce, because they don't want to open Salesforce as they're on the road, they need something quicker. And so it was super important that the interface to engage would be Slack or Teams. It can be depending on the org. By now we have this running in, I think, tens of different organizations. And so the most important thing here were to be able to do like few things. First of all, any natural language question that you have, you can immediately send it and get an answer. But most importantly, it was very important for them that 3 hours before a meeting, whether virtual or face-to-face, the account manager would automatically get a briefing of all the previous engagements with a particular account and possible marketing collateral or possible next steps that could help them close that potential account. So they don't have to necessarily come in and ask a question, but the AI is being proactive, because unfortunately, salespeople, they can have a million tools, but if it's not fed to them, it's not so useful. And it was also very important that it will be printable, because before it was printable, if it was a physical meeting and they couldn't take it with them, it didn't provide the value. Now, all these things that I tell you had to come with someone thinking about the use case for a bit and then going and doing it. And I bet that you can internally in your org go to your developer team and say, create a sales bot. It wouldn't make an impact. You have to, and this is what I'm going after. You have to think about a use case and you have to think about how you're getting it out. So we saw some examples in the observability world. I also want to show you an example in the automation and agent world, again, with a use case in mind. We did it with one of the largest pharma companies in the world. Their use case is kind of repetitive for, I think, all of us. When you're working with a vendor or a partner or whatever it might be, you're getting security questionnaires. Sometimes it's RFPs, right? Depending on it can be RFP, it can be security question, it can be a bunch of those things. And you have your own org policies or your own product descriptions. You can think of those things in a similar way. And those are pretty complicated policies. And then you get the security questionnaire, or you get an RFP that you need to respond to, or you get something of that nature. And you manually kind of copy, or you use an old template and you kind of copy from that. And we said, well, in the AI world, similarly to the way we abstracted leases, we can have AI fill in most of those questions automatically. And only the questions that it wasn't able to answer automatically will be deferred to a human. So it will save so much time. But it's very important that if we're looking at an answer and we click at the source, the AI will actually take us to exactly where it came from. By the way, you can see ours. Um, the other thing that was very important in this case is that it's not just filling in the answers here, is that you can download the original file in its original format with the answers on it, because then you would take the file and import it to whatever system you got it from. And without that capability, you would manually be copying over. And again, this will make or break your use case, because if they have to manually copy over, I can almost guarantee that they're not going to use the solution. And this is kind of the thinking around this. It's about the real use cases. By the way, once you have the real use cases applied, I just want to show you one more. By the way, this is more agents world. One more I show you, and then I dive into that. So remember the IT ops use case from before, which looked like this. This is a very, very similar use case. You want to integrate a bunch of sources. You want it to automatically correlate these sources and give you an answer to a question. But you can notice the interface is completely different. Why is that? Well, because in this use case, the average user was not the IT ops department, it was people external to it. And if for people external to it, if you give them that, they're overwhelmed. By the way, if you try to take this to the IT ops department, they will not like that, because they want more granularity, they want explorability, they want to be able to navigate. And so you see how different folks sometimes want different experiences, and it's not just the generic chatbot. Anyway, it's the same use case. You integrate a bunch of sources, you correlate them automatically. And if I go back to the Unframe concept, those are the same building blocks, right? Being able to correlate a bunch of different sources, being able to use different agents for different purposes, being able to abstract and extract unstructured data. And those repeatable building blocks built to the highest quality possible. So not someone building them in a garage real quick, but actually devoting a lot of time to them, but still making them configurable, for example, with a blueprint. That's what created the value. And this is why I feel Unframe works with so many enterprises. And here's the by the way. By the way, once you have a lot of use cases being applied in observability, in agents, in extraction and abstraction, only then, if you remember, I started with the mega agent, one that does it all. Only then you can put like a smart router on top of that, and then you can start deferring. So once you have multiple solutions that each one of them has a standing of its own, like there's actual business users using it, saying, yes, it gives value, we like it, it works well, etc. Then you can start saying, okay, let's layer on top of that some smart navigator that can take you to the relevant ones. But to get accepted into the smart navigator, we need someone, business users that are actually using it, saying it gives them value, and it actually operates well. We don't allow any indie person, like any individual person in the org that thinks about an agent, to just add more into this router, because then you end up with something that no one is using. That's it. That's the general about Unframe. That's the general of how we feel enterprises operate. Obviously, I can talk a lot more. I can show you a lot more demos, but I think that gives a good overview. Yeah, it took us about 30 minutes. Let's go to questions. Maybe I'll stop sharing.
So if you do have questions, the chat is open. I'll read them. For Shay, I do have questions of my own. The So Unframe, compared to man, when you get into AI and the models, it's just like so many things out there.
Yeah.
You can configure. You can grab a model from Hugging Face, grab an open source wireframe, create your own chatbot, and try and have some fun. Have some fun with it. But in order to do kind of enterprise things that are trusted, it looks like that's kind of the direction that that Unframe has gone. Kind of an opinionated way of doing things. Do you guys have a set of models that you like to use? Are they models that are available to everybody, or are they just Unframe models that you guys have trained? What does it look like?
Sure. So one sec, I'll bring up my screen again. Sorry that I stopped sharing. But generally, we're LLM agnostic. It was actually I wouldn't say agnostic completely, but it was very important for us to try and avoid developing or um, to fine tune or train our own model. The reason we try to avoid it is because it's a never ending chase. You can create now. You can probably take, I don't know, 4.0 or oh 01 and fine tune it to do something better. But there's no chance you're going to compete with OpenAI coming out with oh 03, and then sorry, your model got obsolete. And then, every time you fine tune, you're kind of deviate from the natural progression of those foundational models that is just so quick now. You're taking a big risk. And so what we found, it's better to stay evergreen. It's about how do you make the relevant use cases using those models. It's not trivial at all. It's not like one prompt on top of the one thing and it works. Um, and this is kind of the idea of the building blocks, like, right? If I want to abstract, what is the process that's going to be needing to run in order to make that? So back to your question, we're LLM agnostic. We can use any of the modern LLMs. So think OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, and any of the modern open source ones. So think Llama by Meta, Mistral, things of that nature work quite well. If you use us as a SaaS, then we will opinionate also which model sits underneath it. If you deploy it on your perimeter, which we fully support, then you can choose the LLM. We would give you a recommendation for what we think is right. Uh, but obviously, any of the modern ones would do a pretty decent job. There will be some difference. But yeah, that's kind of how we approach it.
Okay, no, that's great. And I think you might have covered the question that Srini Murthy had in the chat. What kind of infra is needed to host this in private cloud?
Yeah, it's very small here. I don't
Yeah.
It's yeah. I don't know if you guys see it. It's not so much.
Yeah, one or two machines with 4 vCPUs, 16 gig of RAM. Yeah,
Yeah,
not a lot.
yeah, not a lot. By the way, oh, sorry, I don't know how we jumped here. By the way, I think we have this diagram to kind of go into the deep, a bit behind the scenes. We try to not use things that are too obscure because unfortunately enterprises will be quite rigid on that.
Mm-hmm.
So things that are rather acceptable. It's not all of these are always used, right? It depends on the use case. For some use cases, you won't even need a vector database, so there will be no use in type sense. For some use
Mm-hmm.
cases, you will not need a Columnar database, so ClickHouse will probably not be used. And the same here, right? Sometimes your integrations are only SaaS systems. Sometimes your integrations are database. Sometimes the integration is one way. Sometimes the integration is two way because you want to change data. Sometimes the integration is just on the fly. You don't pull anything. Just when you get a question, you hit that underlying source. And so the idea is to be able to tailor it to the actual use case when it comes relevant. But generally, yeah, the metal that is required is 1 to 2 machines with 4 CPUs and 16 gigs of RAM, probably weaker than the average laptop. Managed Postgres, so probably RDS or anything similar if you deploy it on your cloud. And if vector database is necessary, then we would also probably set up a TypeSense instance. If Columnar database is necessary, then we probably will deploy ClickHouse as well. But almost in all cases, the metal cost is so minimal compared to like the actual impact that we hope to make that it's nothing substantial. We don't require GPUs because we're using LLMs that are either accessible via API, or if you use Olama, then we would work together with you to get this up on a GPU instance.
No, that's great. One more question from the chat from Anil.
Mm-hmm.
How do you play well with other agent frameworks?
Mm-hmm.
He's naming some other frameworks like Crew AI, Composio. There's probably a lot more out there
Yeah.
to not even know the names.
Yeah.
Why choose something from or why choose one agent framework over another? And maybe are you guys using an agent framework or did you build something on your own?
Great question. So I saw the question was a bit confusing because he asked why choose this. So just to clarify, Unframe is all about delivering solutions, not giving a framework for developers to develop their own agents. We could, to be honest, we could take the platform and expose it to the indie developer to make something of their own, but it's not just for the purpose of making agents. This is a full platform for making solutions. Now, whether we use agent frameworks of our own, So we looked into it when we started. We looked at LangChain, we looked at Crew, we looked at a bunch of them, and the conclusion we got to is that probably they will add more complexity, and for every use case that we will try to create, we would have to hammer very hard on the framework to get what we want out of it. It sounds very neat when you say, hey, it's a framework, you can use it to manage your agents, etc. But once you're trying to think of actual use cases and how complicated the flow can get in various different scenarios, you're usually coming up to the fact that you probably don't want to bind yourself to a particular framework, but rather, and this is kind of the idea of Unframe, create those building blocks rather than a framework that you can then quickly use for the individual use cases. And that's kind of what we did behind the scenes. We're not using LangChain or Crew AI or any of those. There's a lot, by the way, since we came. I mean, I think if you look online, you'll find hundreds. Maybe one of them, is great. But at some point in time, we just said, we don't go this route. So we built our own kind of the state machine, the management of the agents is kind of beneath the building blocks, and then you have the building blocks themselves.
All right. So Neil, hopefully that answered your question. Yeah. Again, if anybody has any questions, just put them in the chat. I'll read them out loud for Shay to take a crack at. All right. Looks like Patrick has a question. Which vendor's foundational models do you use and why?
Great, good question.
ChatGPT, Llama. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, great question. So what we found is that it's not very trivial. And if we get to opinionate, so the customer, the customer isn't deploying on their perimeter, and we choose the LLM, then we found different LLMs are good for different things. And in most cases, you want to mix and merge them. So you can have some examples. You can have Sonnet writing your SQL and Gemini validating it would be better than Gemini writing the SQL and Sonnet validating it, or Sonnet writing the SQL and validating itself. It's pretty counterintuitive. We found GPT to be great on knowledge questions. Yeah, it's like I don't want to go into each and every one, but it was hard to guess. It's a trial and error in some cases. And in most cases, you want to involve more than one. In use cases where speed is very important, you want to hit them all, and the first one to respond is great. In use cases where it was all about the accuracy, you want them to work pretty hard, and you want them to work on each other's answers before you present the answer to the user. And this is what I was going with before. If you try to go the generic route, you're going to suffer from inaccuracies, incompleteness. You're not going to give something that the users are confident with.
No, that's great. And Patrick, if you have any follow-ups, just put those in the chat. We have one question from John Patton. As AI capabilities continue to evolve rapidly, what emerging enterprise use cases are you most excited about developing for your platform over the next 6 to 12 months that might kind of reshape how organizations interact with their information systems?
Great question. I think the part that I'm most excited about, so now we have enterprises that are using 6 or 7 different use cases of Unframe on the same enterprise. And now we're talking about adding this, smart routing. So any person from any part of the org can ask, and as long as there's an agent that is responsible for it, it will hit that agent. But those agents were not created in a vacuum. They're not mini agents. Each and every one was about a use case that it was able to solve, and to solve very well. And through that gradual process, it's almost like you build something incredible, and then you put the layer on top of it, and it looks amazing. I think the comparable to that is how great companies are being built. You build one product that works quite well, and then you move on to the next product and the next product and the next product, and suddenly you have this massive mammoth that is so impressive. You just do that same process within an org. So the moment I'm most excited about is when organizations that are using Unframe are going to be so powered by Unframe in so many parts of their org, then this mega agent is going to look like magic. It's not going to look like something generic that someone just created, and you ask a question, maybe you get the right answer, maybe you don't. It hits exactly like the relevant solution and gives you an experience that is just phenomenal. And I think that's the part that I am most excited about.
No, that's great. Going from, hey, here's this really generic thing that you get spun up really fast, to I have a overall routing level for all my smart agents that I've already built. Anybody can ask a question, it'll find the right agent, go to it, and come back with a highly trusted answer.
Right. And each one of them being built in a not a simple process, but an actual, like the painful process that we all know from creating something of value.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, that's what creates the value. Yeah.
Uh, so thinking of that painful creation process, I know you guys have kind of, you have the platform, you have the building blocks. Those things are some of the generic pain that people would go through, kind of building. If you're doing siloed chatbots for every little department that you'd have to go through over and over again. Uh, what's the kind of the delta in time? Like you're saying, it was, maybe months for a development team to go start from scratch and do just a single point solution. When you guys have an engagement, uh, people get the platform, whether SaaS or on-prem. I'm assuming they get Unframe professional services type people as well to work hand in hand to get to flesh
They
out the business flows, and then build it.
basically it's I don't like the name professional services because it sounds like you need to scope a project and someone is going to have to
Yeah.
pay for it, etc. No, we hop on it's literally, we start talking about a use case, and in most organizations they already mapped AI use cases, and they map them in the most natural way possible. Some
Mm-hmm.
business user is using ChatGPT at home, and then they come to work and they're like, why am I still doing this annoying task now? Why can't AI help me? And they're a business
Mm-hmm.
user. And so if Unframe comes through the door and talks to them and says, hey, where can AI help you? They immediately go. They're like, I need something that will help me when I do X, Y, and Z. And then we dive a bit deeper. We spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes. 3 days later, they have a running solution in their hands because Unframe went back and implemented it on its platform in a way that is going to serve that exact use case with building blocks that we can rely on. So when we give them the solution, we are so confident that we say, only if you like it, only if it gives you the value, then we'll talk about payment. Before that, there was no scoping. There was no like, let's decide how much you need to pay. Nothing of that nature. It's not that we surprise you with the check at the end. If you do decide to go and license it, it's going to cost per solution per year. And when we say
Yeah.
per solution per year, is because we're going to maintain it, we're going to add capabilities to it, we're going to troubleshoot it. You get a full managed service, but it's something that actually delivers value. And if you would try do it internally and you would go to your tech team, the first thing they're going to tell you, oh, sorry, I don't have room in my backlog. So you'll go to the manager and say, no, this is actually pretty important. And they'll say, well, it's going to take like 5 months. And
Mm-hmm.
then what? So yeah, that's
Yeah.
the comparable. I think the Unframe route is nicer.
Yeah. So less of a professional services, more of maybe AI concierge or AI.
AI Santa. You write
Yeah.
your wish and it shows up 2 days later.
Yeah. AI Santa, and if you don't like it, it's got to. You don't have to return it to the store because you didn't buy it in the first place.
No,
You have a
exactly.
chance to buy it.
Exactly.
No, that's uh, yeah. And on the back end, like you said, you guys maintain that code, so you don't have to have, I don't know, 5, 10, 20, 50 guys
No.
managing those silos. Question from the chat from VJ. Could you give some more examples regarding ensuring accuracy? It sounded like in some of your answers you're having models fight against each other or
Also,
compete
there's a
for an
lot.
answer.
There's a
Uh,
lot of things we do in accuracy. Yeah, I'm happy to share. One of the things that is the most impactful, that made the most impact, is to force AI to attribute to the source, but in a way that is usually deterministic. So I'll give you an example. If your source of truth is Excel sheets, you have to ask AI which cell it got it from. So the actual
Mhm.
address. And then in a very deterministic way, you can validate if the info is there or not, because you can go to the actual cell programmatically and compare the numbers. Now, even if it's some computation, you force it to give you the address of every single step of the computation, you could deterministically say this is accurate or this is inaccurate, regardless of what AI came back with. And that helped us reduce hallucinations by over 90%. It's very hard to do. It sounds trivial. Okay, tell me your source. When it hallucinates, it's pretty good at hallucinating sources as well, but you usually are able to find that. By the way, when you do that, you're going to reduce your completeness. So instead of AI answering 100% of the questions, but 40% of them being wrong, AI will probably answer 90% of the questions. But when it does answer, your accuracy is going to be 98%, which is much more impactful than 100% of the answers, but 60% accuracy. That's
Mhm.
useless. Yeah, that's the thing.
Right. So yeah, VJ, if that answered your question, hopefully it did. If not, uh, ask a follow up. Uh, here's another question from Anil.
Hmm.
Uh, it's just that maybe he's been running around taking care of kids while trying to listen. Can this all be run on prem, run in a customer's environment?
Yes.
And is there any IP or security concerns?
Yeah, it can definitely run on the environment of the customer, whether it's your data center or your cloud. We're also LLM agnostic. So if you deploy in your perimeter, you can choose the LLM it operates with as long as it's a modern LLM. As far as our security practices, it's very important to us. I was previously a founder of a cybersecurity company. Obviously, we take SOC 2 Type 2 very seriously. We're ISO 27001 compliant. But yeah, no data would be leaving your own four walls. We don't even need access to the actual data. Like, you can deploy it on your perimeter. We're happy to help troubleshooting and adding capabilities and things of that nature, but generally, no data would be leaving your environment.
Nice. So on the just a question on the that I have on the kind of the unframed charges versus the LLM charges. Say we choose say Google Gemini as our backend. Uh, say it's in our own in our own Google account using our Gemini. Does it end up being per solution per year payment unframed plus then on our Google bill we have the Gemini charges? Is that kind of how it works?
If you deploy the solution on your perimeter, then
Yeah.
you will incur the cost of the metal and the cost of the APIs that it will call. If you use it as a SaaS, we take care of that. So you don't pay for AI interactions, you don't pay for the metal, you just pay per solution per year. Um, yeah.
Gotcha. Uh, as models are developing really quickly, this is another kind of how does the support work question. Gemini just went from 1.5 to 2.0. A lot of our teams that have been working on their solutions, they did the upgrade and like, hey, it doesn't quite work. It doesn't
Yeah.
quite work right the way it
Yeah.
used to. It's not
Yeah.
backward compatible. Maybe a behind the scenes question. How do you make that work, and
Yeah.
how do you see uh, keeping up with that? Because it looks like there's only maybe a 6 month leash before 1.5 goes away, which
Yeah.
enterprises are used to running something for like 20 years. Like, don't touch it.
Yeah.
How do you see that working?
Yeah, and so I think that's a great point, and this is why we like the idea of the platform, because we go to the building blocks from which the different solutions are made, and we just upgrade those, or we update those, or we add support for another model for this individual building block. And then once you did that, all the individual solutions that, mind you, there can be thousands of individual use cases, they all immediately get like all these advancements. So they suddenly all support now Gemini 2.0, or they suddenly all enjoy new features that they didn't even ask, but they came from a different solution that is in a similar environment, and the capability just shows up. And so you get to benefit from the advancement of AI, and you get to benefit from the advancement of other solutions. just because you work with Unframe. It's not just one point solution. It's a platform that your point solution is maybe running on top, but it's all being upgraded for you. Like you don't need to do anything.
No, that's great. Another maybe behind the scenes question, not necessarily how the platform works, but more on the software development lifecycle type things of these types of solutions. Anybody out there that comes from a development background, maybe working in Java, unit testing and test-driven development has like been either adopted or beaten into our minds. Write the test fails, write something that works, you get the green bars. Are you finding ways to do test-driven development while using Gen AI large language models, or is it a different approach that has to be taken?
It's very interesting to bring up test-driven development. I feel almost anyone that's working on AI is kind of doing a test-driven, because to be honest, you don't have a choice. Once you write a use case, you just start trying it, right? There's no way you just write it and launch it without ever running it, because you don't know how the AI is going to react. You don't know what you're going to get back. And then you start fine-tuning your, making your prompt even better, changing some stuff, changing your flow, changing how. And so it's almost like we went from a very deterministic world where you could write the tests at the end to a very non-deterministic world where you write something, you don't know if it's going to work, and you try it. And then if it doesn't work so well, you change a few things and you try it. And in a weird way, it became non-deterministic, and so you don't have a choice. You don't start with a very rigid test. You might not call it test-driven development because you don't actually write a unit test. But in the sense of how you develop, you gradually walk towards the outcome that you hope by trying and trying and testing and trying and testing and trying and testing.
All right. Not seeing any other questions in the chat, but I do have a question that I ask all our presenters. It's not a technical question, but a kind of a career development question, career advice question. Because sometimes we do get some early career people that join, college students. You're obviously a veteran in the field, multi-time entrepreneur. Knowing what you know now about how things have progressed, and maybe even looking into the future, how things might progress in the future, any tips that would you give? Any career advice on people just starting out on what to do to become successful?
Interesting. I think the number one, especially because you talked about people just starting their career, my number one advice would probably be to take risks, because when you just start your career, you can afford taking risks that are substantial. It might, in a weird way, you don't quite understand it, but you can take so many risks regarding the place you choose to work in. I wouldn't, I wouldn't graduate and think, how can I comfortably get settled in? I would try to challenge, try a bunch of stuff, take risk, because you can afford it. You don't have a large implications. Once you get older or deeper into your personal life, you start to have a family, children, whatever it might be, it's much harder to take risks. And so if you didn't take them early on, it will become harder and harder to take them as time goes by. I think that's the number one thing. And that's true for any field you decide to go to. Now, right, I know this session is obviously for tech and tech oriented, but that's the number one thing I would say. So don't hesitate. If you want to try something, just go ahead and try it. If you want to work at some company and to other people it looks crazy, like, why do it? If you're young, it's early in your career, just go for it. You're allowed to take risk, and you have a lot of time, and nothing will happen. So that would be my tip.
No, that's great. And it looks like we have maybe one final question from the chat, Anil. Maybe kind of along the lines of career, how to break into AI apps and agentic AI. He's got mobile development experience, and wants to pivot to AI, where do you? Because there's so much you could maybe learn.
Right.
Any curated thoughts on where to begin?
Yeah, I think, and this is a matter of depending who you will ask, but I think the biggest opportunity is in the applied AI. So how do we take that concept of AI and make something of value that is for people? And I think in a lot of that is going to be how do we make it accessible to the simple person? And the answer currently with the interfaces we know today is mobile. That's the most available interface. That's the one that is being used all the time. I previously worked for Facebook. Like the mobile was the most important interface by far, more than anything else. And so I would say, look for applied AI in companies that are mobile oriented, because applied AI does not require deep AI research. It doesn't require a PhD from Stanford. It's not that. It's almost always like taking the foundational models and making something of value. And I think mobile is a great background to have for that, and maybe even more so than the web, because it's about accessibility. It's about being fast, about someone just pulling it from their pocket and using it. I think that's going to make a big impact.
Great. So Neil, hopefully that I was surprised. I don't know why I should be surprised, but he tied it into the experience that you already have because it does make sense. It is everybody's on their phone all the time. Everybody in the world has a mobile device, so you might be able to pair up something old that you already know with something new and make something useful for everybody.
For sure.
So Shay, thank you very much. Really appreciate you joining us today. Great to hear uh, about Unframe and then you kind of AI in general, how to make it useful. Uh, yes, really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys.